and welcome to Conversations with the Monk Dude, where we talk about love, creativity and wisdom. And I'm really, really happy to welcome my friend Gopi Kallayil. He works at Google as the, let me see if I get this right, the
Sure.
Chief Evangelist of Brand Marketing.
That is correct.
That's your current position at Google. I'll ask you a bit about what that is
Sure.
later. But welcome to the show. It's really, really
Thank
nice
you, Dada.
to finally get
Pleasure
have
to
this.
be here.
We've talked a lot, but this is the first time we've really done this on camera. I've been wanting to do this for a long time.
Thank you, Dada, for having me on the show. It's my pleasure.
So, why don't you tell a little bit of our story?
How we met?
Yeah.
It is one of the most improbable stories of how I made friends with different people. So, which you know some pieces of it, but for the sake of your viewers, I will repeat it. So our mutual friend now, Evan, who represents international musicians as they come into the US or San Francisco, had invited me to listen to the West African Malian singer-performer Salifa Keita, who was performing at Yoshi's. So I was really intrigued. I had heard Salifa on YouTube and other sources, and I wanted to see him. So went there, and while I was sitting there, I turned to my right, and I see what traditionally I would have seen in an Indian temple or festival, a man in orange, clearly a Swami, someone of an ascetic practice from a certain order. And I was utterly fascinated, not because I was not in Rishikesh or Varanasi, I'm sitting in Yoshi's in San Francisco. I turned to my friend Evan and I said, is that like a Swami? Do you know this person? He said, I don't know. I was more intrigued. I look in your direction, and you look every bit like what I would expect in one of those destinations in India, except I could also tell you are not Indian. Now I'm really intrigued. Now I could have left that situation alone, but I don't. I'm curious, and that curiosity made me walk towards you in the break and ask you, who are you? What's your story? And then you introduce yourself as Dada Navanilananda with the Ananda Marga order, and you're very fond of music, and to make it even more intriguing, that you were just living and running an entire yoga meditation center 4 or 5 miles from the Google office. So I took your card. I said, I must come and visit you. So that's really the start of that story. And it could have ended with just a couple of casual introductions. That's happened with hundreds of people where a couple of conversations doesn't go. But you followed up, and it's led to many, many interactions, collaborations, and really one of my most fulfilling and interesting and fabulous friendships. So thank you.
Well, thank you for putting it like that. And I just thought it was so funny. You came up and you said, well, what's a monk doing at a rock concert?
That's right. That was my line. Yeah, what is a monk like you're doing in a rock concert?
And I think I said something like, well, I like rock music.
And it so happened that years later, there is a strong connection, a couple of more things if I may add.
Yeah.
I went to a festival called Bhakti Fest, which is a Kirtan yoga festival that takes place every year in the Palm Desert in Southern California. So they sing traditional yoga or Hindu-based Bhakti yoga devotional music at this on 3 stages, and it 24 hours they have this kind of music, many artists play. And 2 years ago, Salifa Keita came to that festival.
Oh, really?
To complete the full circle.
Oh, I wish I'd known.
Yes, he performed there. He was the headliner.
Oh, yeah.
And, clearly inspired by your sartorial style, my book is also I picked the same color.
Thank you. So I've been reading your book. I'm really enjoying it. Well, you're a great storyteller. And I know that this is a big part of your work. And you've invited me to hear one of your talks at Google and kind of show me how it's done. It was really good.
Yeah.
And but that comes through in your book because it's really a kind of collection of stories. I mean, each chapter, and so I don't remember how many chapters there are, but I know there's 5 sections.
36, I believe.
36.
Yeah.
Okay, you would remember because
Yes.
you did all the work.
Yeah.
Which is your favorite story of those kind of 36 stories in your book?
Yeah, one of my favorite ones obviously is the way we made the hangout between the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu happen, or actually one even preceding that, how I happened to meet the Dalai Lama. And there is a theme to it, and which is one of the most important principles in the book, which is when a door opens, walk through it. If you're curious about something, lean into that curiosity. Because if I didn't have that curiosity about you and followed it all the way through, you and I wouldn't be sitting and talking here. We would have just passed each other. It would have been a 3-second exchange and nothing else would have happened. And it's similar kind of curiosity and following the curiosity that eventually led me into the living room of the Dalai Lama in Dharamsala and have a conversation with him like we are doing now. And to me, that is a fascinating story. So I love that. In terms of content or what the chapter that seems to resonate a lot with people, because multiple people have come and talked to me about it, I posed myself the question, if I had 1 extra hour, what would be the next most important thing that I would do with that hour that would create joy, happiness, well-being? And it's fascinating what my system came up with, what is the next thing I need to focus on. So, and it's a thought experiment I ask people to do, because that sort of establishes and the answers to the question. And that is an interesting chapter. It's not a story, but it's a really good piece of simple wisdom and advice. And the number of people who've read it and come back to me and had some comment or perspective on it's fascinating.
It's actually a very practical book. I mean, you've got a whole section at the end where you give kind of takeaways, that these are the sort of ways that you can improve your life in various ways.
Correct.
But let's backtrack a little, because this book kind of reflects the very unusual trajectory of your life.
Yes.
So can you give us a little snapshot of, how you came to where you are and where you came from?
Okay. So yeah, my roots go back to southern India, which is where I was raised. And if I go all the way back, culturally, my sense of identity comes from actually a small rice farming village I talk about, which is where my grandparents lived and my parents were raised, called Chittilancheri. And I did spend good chunks of my childhood there. I was not raised there because my father had left for a job, but every summer I would get shipped back. So my cultural identity, my extended family is all from there. Our sense of roots and belongings are there. And starting from fairly modest Indian upbringing in smaller towns and whatever basic education we could get from a government school or something, somehow my life in a long and winding road has led me through professional education in India and living and working in India and then Hong Kong and southern China and eventually in the US and going to business school here and now and finally putting me in Silicon Valley for the last several years, and now ultimately ending up with a place with an organization that is having a profound impact on the trajectory of life on the planet, that is Google. So that is a short version.
Yeah.
And along the way, exploring different aspects of my life, becoming a yoga teacher, and a fairly long entrenched meditation practice, opening the covers under that whole inner journey, the many modalities that are available from meditation and yoga, picking up a little bit of music, releasing my first music album, writing my first book, all of that, and traveling, having never even gone to a single country. When I graduated college, nobody in my family had a passport, and from that sort of a possibility now to having been to some 54 countries, 7 continents, really exploring the world, roaming it. It's all been different dimensions of what I consider living a full life with the best of circumstances that I have access to.
You've been to Antarctica?
I have been, yes.
So you did cover the 7 continents?
Yeah. I did, went to all 7 continents.
Amazing.
I flew down I was determined to get there in order to just check that off and say, so it's an interesting story. I flew down to Punta Arenas, the southernmost point in the continental South America in Chile, found a small company that a couple of times a year puts people on a 6-seater plane, flies them into the Chilean Antarctica research station, and you stay there for a few days. That's how I landed in. Because the only other way to go is that you have to be part of a research operation. You're a scientist, or you can volunteer at one of the research stations. You can further down towards the South Pole. Or a lot of people, tourists, go on cruise ships. But on cruise ships, you only stay on the ship. And you look at Antarctica.
You can't land.
They'll put you on a small craft and you go on beach and stand on the beach, take a penguin pictures and then come back. You don't go inside the continent itself. For that, you have to be part of a research establishment. That is my understanding. So this was different. They fly you in and drop you. It's on King George's Island, and you spend some time exploring.
You are indeed an adventurer.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of things I want to ask about Google, and then I want to also ask about your kind of inner life. But let's just get clear. What is a chief evangelist of brand marketing?
Yeah. So, it trips up a lot of people because the word evangelist usually has a connotation with religious evangelism. But the technology industry adopted that title, and many, if you search for evangelist on, say, LinkedIn, you'll find many people, and most of them seem to come from the tech industry. So the whole idea is that you passionately evangelize or talk about some aspect of technology. Usually it's about a new technology that is emerging. In my own case, as Chief Evangelist Brand Marketing, my role is to work with the biggest brands in the world that are using Google as a platform to market themselves, because that's one of the big value that Google provides to many of these organizations as a marketing platform. Because the audience or the customers or the consumers that these brands are trying to connect to all happen to be spending a lot of time on some Google service or the other. So it's an opportunity for them to connect and have some sort of engagement. So my role is to meet with the leadership of these big brands, and you can think of those big brands as Nike, Starbucks, Disney, American Express, L'Oreal, Coke, Pepsi, Honda, Toyota, and I demystify digital brand marketing for them. Okay, so I talk to them about what is changing in terms of consumer behavior, what sort of engagement other brands are having, how to succeed in this new realm, because many things that they have thought of and have been doing have to change very dramatically as this new world is emerging, where people are very digital and digitally savvy, and we no longer, many of this new generation of consumers don't think of online and offline. We think of going online. Many of them are like, I just love online. And how do you then navigate through such a world? That is really what I'm doing at the core of it. So I say I demystify digital brand marketing to the top 500 or 1,000 brands in the world.
Which keeps you pretty busy, I guess.
It keeps me extremely busy and also
energized. It took me a long time to get you this interview. So contrast that to where you grew up. And I remember in one of your talks you were talking about this experience of going back to your sort of homeland and seeing the impact, and in many ways really great and good impact that the technology that you're working with now has had in those communities.
And I was there just in December. 3 weeks I was home to visit my parents, and even though they moved away from the village where they were, I went back to visit some family. We had like a little ceremony in our private personal temple in our family home. So I'd gone back and reconnect with cousins, etc.
So how has Google, or IT, or the internet, or this modern technology affected those communities, or in a positive way?
Yeah, the way it has affected them, Dada, in a positive way, is that we live in an era where information is like oxygen. Everyone needs it, and if you have it, it empowers you in so many ways. You're more well-informed, you're smarter, you take better decisions. It helps you in earning livelihood in a different way. So many things it touches, and it reduces friction. You can communicate things with people faster. So many benefits. And if you think of how life evolved on the planet, or how life moved on this planet, say even as little as 20, 30 years ago, there was disparity in that some parts of the world had access to more sophisticated technology and didn't quite reach other parts of the world. Even basic things like television or just the ability to make a phone call. But now with these technologies, at least access to information is quickly becoming the same for everyone. So here's a tiny example of that. So if, let's say, somebody in that particular village, think of a school kid, wants to look up a piece of information for the science project, that person has now access to, that student has access to a TED talk by a scientist, or since we talked about Antarctica, a researcher in Antarctica, if he is explaining some aspect of whale migration, that content is now available to that person in that village, which was not the case 5 years ago. And
Or they can go and do a university course through Coursera.
exactly,
For
they
free.
can, absolutely, they can do that. And I can talk of fascinating examples where now you have, say, kids in a place like Nepal. They don't live near the ocean. They live in a mountainous, landlocked country. They've never seen the ocean. Their parents have never seen the ocean. Their geography teachers never seen the ocean, and yet, so they don't even know what life forms in water may look like, and yet now you have underwater street view, and if you have an internet connection, you can click on it, and all of a sudden, in a virtual way, you are off the island of Galapagos, looking at marine world and getting an understanding of what Charles Darwin was talking about when he talked about biological diversity. It is that sort of access that is very fundamentally transformational, that you feel like, yeah, the playing field for humanity is now being leveled.
So that's something that, well, you can say originated in America. Computers were invented pretty much in America, or maybe the predecessors in England. But that's brought, or the technology to many, all over the world, and made that possible. What's India brought to America that we need? And of course, I'm thinking in terms of, the problems that you see in your colleagues that they experience from too much stress, too much thinking, too much the kind of pressure that comes from working in that intense environment,
Yeah.
and not having the tools to really connect to their inner selves.
Sure. Well, I can talk about some of the aspects in terms of first the technology world itself. When you say what is India's brought, well, for one, it offers a huge, gigantic marketplace because from a purely economic perspective, after China, it's like you got a population of more than 1 billion people, and that has many, many interesting things as global trade and commerce becomes so integrated across countries around the world. And from an internet perspective, it is also a source of huge talent pool for that entire industry, from everything from, you can see it here in Silicon Valley, the number of companies founded by people who originated from that economic and social system to the outsourcing industry. But even beyond that, forget about the internet. I am fascinated by, and I think this is where you're leading the conversation into India's contribution to what I call the internet. And there's a large body of knowledge, wisdom, and modalities practice that is available, whether it's yoga, meditation, or shastras and Vedantas, an entire vast philosophical system that is available to the entire world to tap into, and is becoming increasingly popular, and more people are studying it. And I think that is a huge contribution. So
how is that affecting companies like Google and other companies in Silicon Valley where we live?
How is what affecting?
The sort of knowledge from India around meditation and yoga and this kind of inner technology.
Sure.
And I know it's being introduced in this culture quite widely. What have you observed about that?
So I don't know if it is affecting directly at an organization corporate level, but at an individual level it is, and all these organizations are made up of a number of individuals. So at individual levels, it is entering the functioning working of this organization in one of two ways, which is each individual there, or many of those individuals, may be adopting as a matter of personal pursuit and choice. Or some of these organizations recognizing the value that these systems, and I call it inner technologies, are building, in a more formal way, bringing it into the workplace and providing opportunities for more of their employees to learn about it and grow it. So let's pick something as simple as yoga. Even though people view it as a physical exercise system, it's more than that. It is a fantastically well thought out, well structured mind-body connection modality. It involves movement and physical exercise, but it also connects with your breath. It has a tremendous impact on your emotional well-being, on your mental well-being. And if you look at just that one practice alone, it is now offered in more and more companies. At Google alone, at the headquarters where I work, there are 37 classes a week. Yeah, more than a yoga studio would offer. So from morning 7 till evening 7, it's available, taught by professional teachers from outside, taught by Googlers like me, or yoglers we call ourselves, who are certified yoga teachers.
Yoglers. I love
Yoglers,
that.
exactly. Yeah. I coined the term. I founded the program. So if you look at it, the company understands that everyone is in a fairly intense and fast-paced environment, and we need these kind of things to kind of outlets to decompress and find a center, find a balance. On top of it, both each at the individual level and at a corporate level, everyone is aware that one of the most important technologies we get to work with is right here. I call it the inner technology, our brain, our body, our breath, our consciousness. And all of these systems allows you to put this technology into a state of peak performance. And companies recognize, understand this, and appreciate it, and are increasingly making it a part of the workplace culture.
And you get, like, whole conferences built around that, like the Wisdom 2 conference where you've spoken a few times.
Absolutely. Actually, every single one of them since inception, yes.
Okay. So you're a veteran of Wisdom 2.
Yeah.
Wisdom 2.0.
I almost did not make that conference happen too.
Oh, really? What
because I met Soren Gorhammer, the founder, who wrote the book, The Wisdom 2.0, and to promote the book, he created a website and featured a few people who thought embody the principles mentioned in the book. Mm-hmm. So I was one of the 3 people interviewed, and after that he came and had lunch with me on the Google campus and asked me the question. I'm thinking of creating a conference around it. What should I do? And I told Soren, don't do it. Nobody will come. Just test the concept out. So much to the Soren is a lot wiser than I am. So much to the benefit of the world, he ignored me completely, and he started
the marketing expert.
Exactly. So he ignored, and every single one of them is sold out. He keeps expanding it. He sells out. He goes to other cities. It's massively successful. So I often tell people, if there is something you want to do, the best thing to do you can do is come and ask me, and do the exact opposite of what I recommend. You will be successful. That is my track record.
So tell us a bit about what Wisdom 2.0 is really trying to achieve.
Well, Wisdom 2.0 is trying to explore this idea that we live in a world surrounded by so much technology, which is extremely valuable, beneficial, has huge positive impact, but also can be very distracting and fragments our attention. So how do you live in a world where you work with all of these technologies in a very useful way, in a consciously chosen way, and integrate these wisdom traditions that have been available to us? And what is the role of these wisdom traditions in a world where we might be struggling to have, bring our attention to something? We suffer from attention deficit disorders. So how do these two worlds integrate? The very modern and very ancient is really what Wisdom 2.0. It brings people from both the worlds and just allows a conversation to unfold from there.
And there's also an element of service in there, like philanthropy and kind of bringing sort of wisdom ideas and seeing their impact on the community and seeing how that can be.
Absolutely, can it be a force for greater good, and what sort of transformations we can affect and help humanity in a really positive way.
I didn't realize you were right there in the beginning trying to stop it stop it happening.
Oh, that's a story that I don't want too many people to know.
Well,
but now that I got it, it's on the internet now.
your
my reputation is sealed. Soren and I joke about it often.
Very good.
So it just proves, it just demonstrates that in any room I walk into, I'm the least smartest person.
So when you're teaching yoga through the Yogalist, your Yogalist program, and other people are teaching meditation or mindfulness, and in Google and a lot of other companies, in not just here, in different parts of this country and around the world, what benefits do you see people getting from this practice when they're working in that environment? What sort of outcomes do you see?
Okay, so and I can talk on benefits at several different levels. The most obvious one, the easiest one to talk about, is at a physical level. Mm-hmm. Whether you meditate or do a practice like yoga with the breathing and the very slow, measured, thoughtful movement with its elements of balance and strength and stretching of muscle, ligament, cartilage. If you see all of those elements at a physical level, it is extremely beneficial in that your body, different parts of the body functions better, your posture is better, you're aligned better, your musculoskeletal system, especially the joints, all of that function better. It has huge impact in your circulatory system, respiratory system, all of that. And this is well researched and documented. So there is that benefit. People, you might have had a busy day and you're sitting in a chair and your body feels very stiff and not and lethargic. You go do an hour of yoga and come out, you feel exploding with energy. It completely just transforms you. It's magical. It's miraculous for me. Especially where we practice, we do outdoor yoga. So just being in the park next to the water, it's fantastic. The second is there's also mental shift that takes place. When you come into the class, or whether it's meditation or yoga, you might be highly distracted. Your mind is buzzing in a different direction. And just by going through this modality, there's something shifts inside of you, first at a physiological level, and then at a mental level, things calm down. Your mind stops racing a little. You're able to bring your attention on something. You are less rattled by, or some problem you're trying to solve. You're now able to solve it in a much more creative way. There's all of that happens. And then there is the emotional benefit. And the best way to say that is your emotional quotient goes up. And this can take many dimensions of there is some situation or a person that is outside of you that might have, in a different context, upset you or irritate you or throw you off the balance. If you come through this practice, and then it seems your resilience is higher. Your ability to resist reacting to it in a non-productive way goes up. So there are physical, mental, emotional benefits. And then on top of it, and this might be open to some debate, not everyone may see it, there is the spiritual benefits of it. If you subscribe to that school of thought, which I do, which I know you do, there is that also that kicks in. That is the extra booster. And some might say that is the most important benefit. But even without going there, because that is not accessible to everyone or not something that everyone may buy into, there are all these other benefits that we can talk about. That is pretty radical.
Yeah.
And it's free.
Yeah. And there's like 37 yoga classes in Google every week.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then they've got the whole Search Inside Yourself program. Which is
correct. And layered on top of it is the grandfather or grandmother program of it all, something called OYL, or Optimize Your Life.
Oh, really?
Yeah, all of this is really pillars under the Optimize Your Life program.
I haven't heard of that before.
Yeah, there is a fairly well-organized program and group of people, and they think about, and I really applaud the people who do it, because they think of optimizing your life along different dimensions. There's the physical, in terms of exercise, body related, and that's why they have everything from yoga to dance to gyms to swimming pools. Then there is mental related things, the GPAUSE program and Search Inside Yourself, and they support things through emotional well-being and teach many things, or I give you access to resources, and then financial well-being, because that's also life energy that is important. So, there's nutrition, because what you put into your body determines it. So even providing us with a lot of information around what is healthy to eat and what is less healthy to eat, color coding the food so you make the choices, giving you enormous amount of information so you can decide for himself what might be best, consulting with a nutritionist if you need to, and then sleep, because that is again an important part of your well-being, because that's when the body restores and renews itself, and important changes take place inside your brain during the sleep cycle. So they provide you with the tools and the education to make sure that you're sleeping better and in a much more healthy way. So all of this under the Optimize Your Life program. It is brilliant, well thought out, and extremely progressive for any organization to think along those lines.
Wow, that's pretty comprehensive.
Yeah.
I hadn't even heard of that one before, and that's a new one. So you're dealing with a lot of other companies. You set up to 1,000 different, big brands. To what extent do you think this kind of wisdom from India, particularly talking about the meditation and yoga tradition, to what extent is that penetrating or being sort of brought into those kind of companies? What do you see?
Right. I don't know if specifically through my work or with those only with those large companies, but in general, when I go to a conference like Wisdom 2.0, or the popularity of these kind of topics is everyone from Ariana Huffington at Huffington Post is talking about it, and I see Deepak Chopra showing up at many of these corporate conferences and teachers like that. So clearly there is a higher degree of awareness. I think earlier people were aware, but there was always this notion that that is a domain that is outside of a for business setting. Okay, it's legitimate, but it lives somewhere outside. But now that separation is gone and it is showing up inside of a corporate event or setting, which is, I think, in my opinion, good. The second is, in the past, often a lot of people might have been aware of its existence, but didn't quite know what to do with it or even think it is necessary. But there is a higher degree of acceptance, and part of it, I think, is because the mystery and mysticism of many of those practices has been stripped away with lots of research and evidence and scientific testing. So when you have someone like Dr. Richie Davidson, who's a neuroscientist at the University of Madison, Wisconsin, conducting research and showing that thousands of hours of meditation actually significantly changes neurochemistry and allows people to have qualities like emotional well-being and resilience and changes at a biochemical level, things in the brain, then people are more willing to subscribe to it.
Oh yeah, that's big aside a lot of sort of skepticism.
Exactly, yeah. So then it makes everyone sit up and take notice.
Yeah, I think that sort of research, especially the brain research, has been instrumental in sort of opening the sort of level of acceptance.
Yeah, and part of it is also Dada, and you very well know this, that ignore the last, I'd say, 10 years, and you go back the previous 100 years, much of the wisdom traditions often came in the form of some sort of spiritual, mystical, religious background, and so it is practiced in the monastic setting, in the ashrams in India, and Tibetan monasteries, and or a Christian spiritual mystical setting, which is fine, well and good, but many business for-profit government organizations would say that is a completely different domain and let it stay, that we can't make the two mix. But in its modern incarnation, many of these kind of teachings and practices have been packaged in a way that is now accessible and easily importable. And so in many corporations where you see being taught, including at Google, they only talk about how it increases your emotional intelligence, and none of the other areas are talked about.
So in this secularization process, do you think something is lost, perhaps? Maybe, or do you think the risk of something being lost?
Not just risks, no. Something definitely, I wouldn't say lost, but it's not being touched upon. Okay? And so and it's the same in the field of yoga. So the way yoga is practiced, or when I say yoga, I don't mean the broader philosophy of yoga, but the physical practice of asanas, but postures, and with the breathing, which most people would refer to as yoga practice in this part of the world. And the benefit is it is now accessible to a larger group of people. The latest study by the Yoga Alliance says 31 million Americans practice yoga now. Okay, this is what the latest study released a few months ago says. So that's fantastic that now 31 million people have picked up something that is healthy and also for the lifestyle. But in order to get to that many people, it would not have happened if it had not been packaged and somewhat secularized. And sure, I wouldn't say something is lost, but some aspect of it is yet unexplored for a vast majority of the people. Am I okay with that? I'm totally okay with that. Because otherwise, for two reasons. First, otherwise they may not even have looked into it. It may not have been available to them. And second, many people take that as a first step.
Exactly.
And then they realize, there is more depth to this. And they become curious. And it's easy for them to take the second step or the 20th step, as opposed to making this huge leap of faith into a completely foreign way of thinking and operating.
So it becomes a stepping stone which people may go on to something sort of a deeper experience.
Absolutely, yeah. And one of the greatest example is, so one of the biggest teachings of book coming from the tradition is the Bhagavad Gita, and there it talks, one of the core principles of it, do your action without being attached to the fruits thereof, right?
Yeah.
The Sanskrit phrase is karmanyeva adhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachina. Do your action with a complete sense of bring excellence into whatever you do, but don't be attached to the fruits thereof. And you take that sort of a theory or a concept and go to, say, a hedge fund manager on Wall Street, right? Where everything is tied to results and performance and big bonuses. It's hard to wrap the mind around it. That is a huge leap in the way of thinking. Impossible for often people to cross that chasm. But if step one is, I know you're stressed at the end of the day, so why don't you come to the yoga studio and just move your body and slow down things, and it's at a very physical level. All you're engaging is your musculoskeletal system and your breath. That is a lot more accessible. And through the process, the person may experience a little bit of stillness in the body, silence in the mind, and spaciousness in the heart. And it is during that window that they might say there is more to the way I'm living and comprehending life. And the window now opens to step into the next room and the next room.
And what I've found is that, I meet a lot of the people who teach these kind of classes.
Yeah.
And usually the teachers, of course, are into it much more deeply than, what they might be able to teach, or might be sort of accessible or acceptable to their audience. So they know, most of the people teaching are already exploring this on a deeper level themselves.
Correct, yeah. And I'm very comfortable that increasingly more and more of the practitioners are also, at least their awareness is very high. I would be, being pleasantly surprised. But when I teach, I constantly expose my students to everything else I know about the field and encourage them to approach it with a sense of curiosity and accept and adopt whatever they like from it. Sure. And there's no judgment or expectations or attachments to it. So for example, I teach the Yogaler's class at Google, and it is mostly a very traditional Hatha Yoga asana practice with some connection of breath, maybe a few minutes of meditation at the end of it. But then I layer on at times, I expose them to the whole path of Bhakti Yoga by bringing kirtan music, and people, and especially in a place like Google, are extremely curious about global cultures and different cross-cultural influences, and some of them know about it, others hear it and said, I had no idea about this kind of music. You came and performed there once, sitting on a park bench with your guitar and singing Baba Nama Kevalam, and it worked, right? So, you open up a magic. And then a couple of times a year, I take them to the Shivananda Ashram in Grass Valley, which is a very traditional yoga ashram with practices exactly as you would find in a very traditional ashram setting in India. And the reason I do that, then I invite my class saying, let's go spend a weekend in a setting that is very authentic and very natural for the deeper study of yoga and going through inner journey. And there will be many other aspects of the yoga path you will get exposed to there which you've not seen or heard about. But let's go see what it's like and be curious. And they are curious. And 15, 20 people come, some of them with their families, and they have it 2 days. Some of them find it magical and go back to it. Some of them say it was intriguing, and but not necessarily something they're called to, and they just go back to their basic asana practice and are not drawn by the other things. But they appreciate it. And there's some of us who say, I couldn't take it for a day. They run away. And it's all okay. It is, you just accept whatever pieces work for you.
Yeah, so I think it's neat that you found this way of sort of being able to express, something that's really, really, it's very deep for you. But in a way that people can bite off as much as they want to.
Absolutely.
That's
Right?
Nice balance.
That's been my own experience. It's taken me a while to get here. In the beginning, I chewed off some pieces. I ran away from some pieces. I still run away from some aspects of it, but that's okay. The way I look at it, Dada, is that it is a vast, rich, philosophical system with many aspects to it. And each of us is on a journey, and if you choose to explore, you explore whatever parts of it that you're drawn to and find your way through it. And You may accept and embrace some pieces because it serves you well. There are others that you may not, and that's okay.
So in your book, as I said at the end, the last piece, you give quite a lot of really good advice.
The tech support section.
Well, there's a whole
the
lot
advice
of,
section. Yeah.
There's a lot of recommendations for people how to bring more sort of balance and fullness into their lives.
Yeah.
So why don't you give our listeners a couple of pieces of advice? What you think is really valuable takeaways that anybody can benefit from, and we'll finish off with letting people know where they can learn more about what you're
Sure, absolutely.
About.
Thank you for asking it. Well, the most important piece of advice that is really the core of the book is that while all of these outer technologies are fantastic, the inner technology is even more fascinating. And not only that, our entire life experience is filtered by this inner technology. If you eat a piece of food, it's being digested by this technology. If you're trying to make sense of this conversation, it is being processed by this technology. And our life experience is a function of how this technology functions. So your quality of life is higher, better, if you move this technology into a state of peak performance. It's as simple as that. And the best way to do it seems to be to look at many of these, what we call wisdom traditions, pick the elements that work well for us and ritualize it into our life. So it becomes like a daily practice. You don't have to think about it. It becomes as natural as brushing your teeth. And that is really the core philosophy behind this book. And I just talk of my own experiments and struggles and successes with trying to do that effectively. And a couple of those principles, just to close off, that I talk about that often works well with people or resonates well is commit to 1 minute a day. There are 1,440 minutes in a day. Commit 1 minute to whatever it is that renews your spirit, that allows you to connect with your inner net. For me, it is yoga and meditation. So my commitment is a minute of yoga, a minute of meditation. And so I have news for you. I haven't meditated as of yet. So right after this, you and I are going to sit. And because I'm with you, probably we'll do 10 minutes.
We're definitely meditating more than a minute.
So the idea there is do whatever it is that nurtures you on a daily basis, but find the lowest threshold that you can say no to. So it's easy to make it a daily habit. Right.
And then if you like it, as you do it more, it'll
feel
slowly
better.
And
so 1 minute becomes 6 minutes, it becomes 10 minutes. On many days, like last week, I was on a plane to New York, and usually when I get on a plane, when the plane is taxiing and take off, I use it as my meditation window. It's just a ritual.
I do the same thing.
Good, okay. And usually there is like a 10, 12 minute window before the taxiing takeoff process complete. And the plane's in the sky, and they say you can take your seatbelt off and the service starts, right? Some 15, 20 minutes on an international flight. That's a good window. So the 1 minute easily becomes 20. And here's the magic there. Sometimes these days, and airports are all busy, they queue you up on the runway, but you can't take off because there are many other planes in front of you. So it's sometimes like a half an hour, 40 minutes wait before we are even finished taxiing and are in the air. So now you've got a 40-minute meditation window. There's nothing else to do. You can't.
The airlines are forcing you to meditate longer. That's excellent.
Airlines are giving me a fantastic opportunity to extend my meditation window, and I thank them for it. Or the air traffic controllers.
Very nice. So I'm loving your book. I've read 90% of it. I've jumped to the end. I always cheat, And I really love the, as I said, you're a great storyteller, and you tell a lot of beautiful stories in there, and you learn a lot from it as well. Where can people get your book, and where can they, see your online talks and all that? And we can put this, we'll put the links at the end of the.
Absolutely, yeah. So the book is, as you can see here, the internet to the internet are available wherever books are sold.
I saw there's a list. There's you've got of course Amazon, but all the other ones, Barnes and Noble.
Yeah, everywhere. Amazon, Barnes and Nobles. It's available at the local San Francisco Airport bookstore. You can get it as an ebook on Amazon and Barnes and Noble Nook. It's on iTunes, Google Play Store. So, these days you just need to know the title, and you'll find it. You just type it into this little magical search engine called Google, and it'll direct you to wherever. In addition, a lot of information about this, where I'm speaking or my interviews, all of that is available obviously on my website, which is www.kallayil.com, which is essentially my last name, .com.
Yep.
And also I post regularly on social media, so we just follow me on Twitter, Facebook, Google+, LinkedIn.
And you get your TV channel there as well, right? Your TV series.
Correct, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So, which is on YouTube as well. It's a
Yeah.
program called Change Makers.
Yep.
And where I have conversations like this with people who are making a change, making a difference, making an impact.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I've waited a long time for this conversation, and I'm certainly not disappointed.
Thank you, Dada.
It's been
It's such a pleasure having you, and from my perspective also, it is well worth the wait.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Namaste.
And namaskar.
Thank you.